Hello, 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 and welcome to the Livestream Happy Hour. My name's Eric Brayman. I am the host of the Livestream Happy Hour, also the program director here with Lane Arts Council, and I am so excited to welcome our special guest from the Eugene Ballet for this first National Dance Week Livestream Happy Hour. Welcome, y'all.
Hello.
We're so excited to hear more about your production of Taming of the Shrew. And before we go over and introduce ourselves, I'm just going to give a quick introduction to the Livestream Happy Hour. We started this now almost 2 years ago, it feels like, when the pandemic had first broken out and we lost all those opportunities to gather in person. We used this virtual platform to connect artists and arts organizations with our community and vice versa. Well, now that we are back in person and getting to see amazing live productions like Taming of the Shrew, we're still using this platform to keep bringing folks together. So thank you for being here and being a part of this wonderful conversation. Well, let's hear some of the folks who are on the call today. So let's introduce ourselves around the table. And Tony, let's go ahead and start with you.
So I am Tony Pimble. I'm the artistic director of Eugene Ballet Company, and I also choreograph as well as being artistic director. And I have been doing that since 1978.
Wow, amazing. Thank you for being here. Paul, I'd love to hand it off to you.
I'm Paul Dustrud. I'm the set designer for Taming the Shrew. We're working hand in hand with Tony Pimble, who also happens to be my wife. So this goes both ways. We're Taming of the Shrew. Anyway, so we're having fun with the show. And onward.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Paul. And it's always great to see a highly creative family. Speaking of creative families, I'd love to hand it off to Danielle next.
Hi, I'm Danielle Tolme, and I'm a principal dancer with Eugene Ballet, and I'll be playing the role of Catherine.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you for being here. And Mark, we'll finish off with you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Tucker. I am also principal dancer with Eugene Ballet, and I will be playing the role of Petruchio. And Danielle and I also happen to be married. I don't know why it's funny. Every time we say it, and then every time Tony and Paul say it, everybody laughs. Like, it's a crazy thing.
It's couples night on the Livestream Happy Hour. It's official. Well, let's jump on in and hear a little bit more about this production. So, Tony, I'd love to hand this first question off to you. Tell us a little bit about this upcoming production of Taming of the Shrew and what specifically is unique in this telling of the story.
Well, obviously it's based on Shakespeare's play. And in this day and age with the Me Too movement, it's kind of challenging to address this play. I've had people say to me, oh, I hate that play. And so I was thinking, how am I going to handle the subject matter? And so I decided that the best way for me to do that was to handle it from the point of view of an arranged marriage. And an arranged marriage from the point of view not just of Catherine, but also of Petruchio. These two people who are put in this situation, he of needing a wife and needing money, and she needing to be married off so that her sister Bianca can marry one of her many suitors.
Mm.
So that's how I decided to handle the material for Taming of the Shrew. It's a ballet in 2 acts. Each act is about 50 minutes in length. And the music is classical music. And I can tell you more about that when you ask me that question about how it relates to females.
Awesome. Great. I can't wait to hear more about that. But something I want to make sure is really clear is that this is an original production of Taming of the Shrew. This is
Yes,
your original
absolutely
telling that you've
right.
created.
Yes, it's a brand new full-length premiere of Taming of the Shrew.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, we actually had a question that came in right off the get-go that I think is a perfect question to actually kick us off. And I'd love to throw this out to anyone who wants to respond is, what's it like to dance in a new ballet, to be kind of the original cast and the original creators?
Yes, Danielle and Mark, you should speak to that.
Yes, I certainly have nothing to do with that.
I mean, there's a lot of excitement that goes around a new ballet, and especially this one that we've kind of been building up to for quite a while. We did the video shoot for this back in the summer of 2019. So it's been a long time coming. And especially having a role created on you, you kind of take ownership over that character, and you're just as much a part of the process of who they become. And it's very exciting.
I think Danielle said it quite well. Just to go along with the excitement of premiering a new work, it is quite empowering to, and especially I think Tony's process is plays to the strengths. She knows us very well. We've had the privilege of working with her for years, and so she knows how to both push our comfort zone and find those edges where it's a little blurry and we want to find something new, something truthful, and at the same time empowering us to be the best at the things that we're good at. I think that's one of the most exciting parts about being created on, especially with a premiere like this one.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that is so true about creating a new work is that it is a collaboration. Yes, I know what I want to do, basically, when I go into the studio with dancers. I know what how the scene needs to be presented, and I frequently have choreographic ideas, but ultimately it's very much a collaboration between me and the dancers. So that as they're working on, especially for Mark and Danielle in this ballet, there's 3 big pas de deux, that's partnered works, and they are instrumental in creating those works. And if they can't do something, because I thought it was a great idea, but it's actually physically impossible, then or I thought it was a great idea and it looks like hell, then we work together to change the choreography so that it looks its very best and they feel their very best. Because for me also, it's very important that the dancers feel confident when they go on stage. They feel confident, they feel comfortable, and they own those roles, basically.
I love that. I love you basically spoke such great wisdom to the creative process, which is making ugly things and trying to solve them, or making impossible things and editing it into a feasibility that still holds that magic of original inspiration. And to talk about this collaborative process, it is such a collaborative process. Any performance art is, and especially in this era, in this process of creation of originality, it's really amazing to hear that kind of energetic synergy that it sounds like you all have together in that process. Well, we've got a little clue, I think, with what Mark and Danielle are wearing, but you have a pretty unique theme for this particular production, which is steampunk. So tell me a little bit about the steampunk thing and how you translated it into the costumes, the characters, and also the set pieces that we'll be talking about later.
Yes, so I'm not entirely sure I remember exactly why we struck with the concept of steampunk. I know we've been working with Joe Moross, who we'll tell you about later, and he is definitely into steampunk. But also the music for the ballet is 19th century music, and the genre of steampunk is that it's this sort of futuristic idea of the 19th century steam age. And it just seemed like a great idea. I didn't want to put the ballet into the 15th or 16th century. I wanted to take it out of that period and move it further up. And because the music is by a composer that's 19th century, it all came together as a concept.
I love that. Paul, anything that you want to add there, kind of in the ways that you kind of picked up and used some of the inspiration of the steampunk? I know we'll get to see some of the set pieces later, but kind of the inspiration and how that fed you.
Well, yes, it's sort of like Victorian machinery that now operates in steampunk is kind of like an extension of, it's obviously steam generated technology, but it still kind of draws upon this sort of Victorian theme and motif. Mm-hmm. And so utilizing that and bringing it in, and plus it's kind of very fashionable, I might say,
currently.
Yeah,
it's really kind of in. So
yeah,
Mark and Danielle are definitely into it tonight. Yes.
And they look great in it. Well, speaking of fashion, let's look at some of the costumes. We've got some shares here of some of the costumes that are in the works. We have some costumes being modeled for us right there. So tell us a little bit about some of these costume pieces and some of the inspiration that you got to really pull on and play with in this process.
Well, when I create costumes, because I design them, and a lot of the times I build them too, I just get online and I look at a lot of steampunk costumes, what people are wearing, and then I take it from there. But we also have to design for dance, so they have to be able to work in these costumes, not just being able to dance the steps, but also to be partnered. So those are important things that I have to take into consideration. So for instance, the red jacket that you see in the top left-hand photo, Mark gets to wear that jacket. And so it's a little heavy, and he doesn't wear it for very long, but he makes a grand entrance in it, and it's very steampunky. But we have to do things like put gussets in the arms so that he can move easily, and we have to figure out how he's going to get it off so that he can dance more comfortably, as well as the top hat, which is very steampunk. And for Danielle's costume, she has this bodice which has boning in it, but it's flexible boning, but it holds shape and form. And actually, usually the guys like it when the ladies have a bodice like that, because it gives a bit more form when they're partnering them. So I did that, and then over 3 years ago, Paul and I were in New York, and I do frequently a lot of shopping for fabrics in New York, obviously, because it's the garment district is fabulous. So some of the fabrics that you'll see on stage, I bought at Mood, which is a well-known fabric store. So for instance, the down left black and gold bodice, that fabric I bought in Mood. It was very expensive. I forget, it was like $150 a yard. It's really fantastic. And there were a lot of beautiful fabrics like that from France and from Switzerland and from Austria. So I wanted to incorporate those in the production, because to me, Jonna Hayden, I've worked with her a lot. She's a costume designer. She always used to say to me, Tony, if you get really good fabrics, they will do more than 50% of the work for you. And it's so true. So I had a lot of fun shopping in New York, as Paul can attest. Back with a suitcase full of fabrics
Yes.
for the show.
We should buy an extra suitcase while we're there.
Yeah.
Curse of the fashion designer at your heart. And that's beautiful. I mean, truly special pieces that you have here. And thinking about steampunk too, it's the fashion is so leather heavy and so metal heavy and very wool oriented. It's got that very Victorian element to it. And to think creatively about how can you represent these materials without suffocating your dancers. I mean, as a performer who has performed in wool in July in the humidity of Michigan, I can say like how much deep appreciation there is for a smart costume designer that can create that kind of aesthetic without that feeling of suffocation.
Right.
So, and it's beautiful. These pieces are absolutely stunning. Well, I think that our next slide actually has a focus, a zoom in on our two dancers. And dancers, I'd love to hear from you when it comes to the costumes. As you started to put on your costumes, how did they help you step more deeply into your character, or what parts of your character did you discover through the costumes?
I think we can both attest to the fact that we feel pretty cool in our costumes. And the style of the movement has got that in it. I mean, Mark can talk a little bit about it, but his style's been inspired by the Fawns. And so just looking at his costumes, I think.
I kind of had an idea, and we talked to Tony a lot about our ideas. It's back to that dialogue of sharing and collaborating. But that idea of that guy, that persona who puts on his cool. It's like he wears his emotions on his sleeves, and his outfits have to mirror the same way he thinks of himself. And so having the opportunity to put on the costume, not only do we have those technical, like a technical assessment of how can I move in this, what is going to challenge certain steps or partnering, but it also invites a little bit of exploration into exactly what your character might have thought when they acquired that clothing. And you really have a very clear, literal sense of their style, their attitude, and their choices that they made behind the style.
Yeah. And I think to my sister Bianca, a lot of her costumes are more of the paler colors, and I have the reds and blacks, and I think it kind of speaks to our personalities. I'm a little bit more spice. I'm a little bit harder than she is, and she is the sweet one, but I think she has a little bit more of a darker side than we all think.
It allows us also to juxtapose our action to what the costume might bring to the stage. So it's like a tool for expression in that way. And you can wear this crazy outlandish coat, and you come in and the coat has its own movement and the coat has flow, and it allows me to hold back and really decide when I want my movement to be bigger or bolder, and when I want the costume to lead.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that by using color specifically, so for instance, Danielle as Catherine is wearing something red in every costume that she puts on, it also helps the audience to track that personality, that character. As soon as they come on stage, people know, oh, there she is again. Especially if you're sitting, 75 feet back at the back of the auditorium and not up close and personal.
Yeah. That was something when these pictures were sent over and I was looking at the images of the costumes, the color stories between the two couples was really exciting to see the juxtaposition there, especially in thinking about the story of Taming of the Shrew. Those two couples could not be more polar opposite in so many ways, and the ways that their love is depicted, or the ways that their relationships, the journeys that they might go under, or the ways that that society might place expectation or perception on those relationships. And to see that kind of societal perception be translated also into these characters, emotions that I can see in the colors is really dynamic and exciting. That's always one of the most exciting things with dance and theater and these kind of productions, is to see how much personality the costumes in and of themselves hold before the actors even and the dancers place their own elements on top of it. And it becomes this full conversation between design and performance in some really exciting ways. Yeah. Well, let's jump over and hear a little bit more. Any other kind of pieces about any other points about the costumes that you wanted to touch on before we move forward?
No, I mean, mostly the other element that's important when you're designing and constructing ballet costumes is to keep them as light as possible. So skirts, for instance, if we can use taffeta and we can use net or stretch mesh, then that's what we will do, because they are light and they move easily, and that's really important.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, all the sneak peeks for everyone who's watching this will be able to watch the stage and be like, I know so much more. Amazing. Well, let's jump over and talk a little bit about the set. And Paul, I think this is where you really get to start to shine in some pretty dynamic ways, because the set pieces for this are magical, full stop. They are just incredibly intricate and magical pieces that are another character almost in the show, I can imagine. So what was the process of envisioning and building these set pieces into production? And I'm going to, as you start talking, I'll get the PowerPoint loaded up in the background and start sharing while you're chatting.
Well, it's also important to note that I didn't design the pieces that Joe Moross has designed. They are what we would call movable set pieces. His are more like parts of they're more like the dancers in a way. They kind of fit in with, they move on stage, they become a mobile set piece, and he's done it. His work is amazing, and these are seriously. Well, this is a little different. This is my set, so I'll come back to Joe in a minute. But the idea behind this is sort of a traditional Elizabethan Shakespearean stage. You know, you have the balcony, the stairs, the inner below, the being able to pop out from underneath, and a bridge, which we kind of evoked a little bit of the London Bridge aspect of this, which is a very Victorian themed bridge over the Thames. And so we tried to incorporate sort of this massive gear, potentially looks like it could move if it had to, like a drawbridge of sorts. And then, we utilized some parts that we had around, and we built some other parts. So I'm an architect, actually. So I have done a few sets in my life, maybe 4 or 5. I've enjoyed it. I've worked in theater for a long time in my early days, but primarily I'm an architect. And so these guys are probably complaining a little bit about how massive, really stout this set is. It's not your typical lightweight set. It doesn't really move when they're dancing on it. Well, I wanted to be able to have the dancers dance on it and have it be strong enough that it wasn't bouncing around and kind of swaying and stuff like that. So we did a pretty good job of making that happen. As well, there are a few set pieces here that move out. There's a set of stairs that come out and can be configured in different ways. And then, of course, I designed this. Interestingly enough, I designed all this in my standard architecture program, which was an interesting way to do it. Normally, you would do it in a SketchUp program or something like that, but I used a Revit program to do this, which is what I usually design buildings with. And it was challenging, but it worked. And we did all the working drawings in it, and they were able to build it just like it was drawn. So it's great, a lot of fun. And Mike and Arundel, the production crew that we are, they have done a fabulous job of detailing this out. And you may have some pictures so what you're looking at here is a couple of elevations. And then in order to get this worked out the way we wanted it to, I took the architecture program I have, actually output to a 3D printer. So we printed this to scale. This is at 1/4" scale. And you can see behind us right here, there's a little set. That's what you're looking at there, is we have a scale set of the Silva Hall with lighting even. And Tony and I spent, I mean, how many scenes are there in this set? It's like
22,
20
23 actually.
23 scenes. So compressing that, 23 scenes, 3 acts.
2 acts.
2 acts, excuse me. There you go. 2 acts, 23 scenes. And it was
Challenging.
challenging.
All scene changes take place à vista.
Right.
So meaning, for those people that don't know that terminology, that they happen in front of the audience. They're not hidden. We don't fly in a black curtain, make a scene change behind, and then fly the curtain out once that scene is set. Everything is happening in front. So we have like the pieces that are hanging above the bridge. Those will fly in visibly. But what this does for me to have a little set to play with, it's kind of like having a doll's house, I suppose, is it really helps me to visualize when I'm trying to set the scene in my head and choreograph how that's going to work. Because if I don't really understand what the set is, then it's going to be a struggle for me. And then, yes, if you back up to, or go forward one.
Yeah. Sorry, I accidentally clicked. That was my bad. But thank you for going with me.
How massive the set is, because that's Mike and Erin Dale. He's our technical director, and Erin Dale is part of the crew also, and they're just phenomenal. They have built the set as Paul designed it. And these are huge pieces. And again, weight is really important. So some of these pieces look massive and you think, my gosh, how heavy is that? But it's actually probably a very thin piece of veneer, and then it's fleshed out with carved foam so that it looks huge and chunky, but it's not overbearingly heavy. And they figure all that out.
Yeah, we repurposed you can see those trusses there. Those are actually some repurposed actual construction trusses that we got from a project that we did. And so those would have gone into a building, but they're actually now being used for the set. And they span, I think they're, I'm not sure what it is. No, it's not 50 feet. It's about,
span, the top span.
The top span's probably about 22 feet. And it's really stout.
Mm-hmm. Well, I imagine for the dancers, that's got to be a really great space to be able to work on, right? To have that sturdy set. I know that as an actor, I've performed on sets that I know technically are sturdy, but the second you get on, there's that little tiny creak and squeak that you're like, ah! So how does that felt? Have you gotten to interact?
Gotten on the set yet?
Yeah,
we've talked it through with them. They know. Okay, I run up 3 steps and I'm at 7 feet. I run back down and I'm at 5 feet, and then I go down. So we kind of talked it all through, but we don't get to work on this huge set until the last week on stage.
And so it's designed, I might say, it's designed to accommodate that lack of movement. So, I mean, in other words, we're all banking on that.
Well, I would still love to hand it back to Danielle and Mark, kind of knowing that you don't get to get on the set until a week ahead of time. What is that process like for you, kind of in preparing for that form of production trajectory?
But I think we keep an open mind to anything that may happen, and we realize that what we thought we were going to be able to do, sometimes we have to adapt and change. But we're fairly used to that happening. I think getting into the theater the week of, and that's the first opportunity to get to work on something. It will be exciting because my sister and I do get to dance a bit up on the platform and run around. And we've been told that we have a bar at the front and a bar at the back, so we don't have to worry about falling off. But it's great. We do have the bike now in the studio, and that is very helpful to work with, especially because of how often it's used.
I suppose there's a preconception of what we will be able to do, what the set will allow us, and then upon arriving to the theater, you kind of have a list of stress tests, and you'll go up on the platform, jump around, wiggle, push it as far as you can, and just establish your boundaries in that
That's his
moment.
way. That's his way.
And then we'll find out if I actually did my job.
We'll find out if Paul is as good as everybody says.
Yeah, he's been doing that with the bike too. He's been jumping on it to see how much it can take, and like I'm sitting on it. It's like,
very exciting.
Well, better to break it pre-production to break it mid-production, right? So
I was talking to Joe. So Joe delivered the ornithopter yesterday, so that we'll have a moment in the studio to do exactly what I just described. But I was telling him, I was like, I can't wait to pull on it and jump up and down, and his eyes got real big. I was like, I'll be gentle.
Well,
truly fantastic piece to work with, and it's a standalone show in and of itself. It's incredible. Can't say enough great things about it.
that's the perfect introduction, Mark, over to, I know, one of the other key collaborators that isn't able to be on the call today. But Tony, do you want to tell us a little bit about Joe and how you all pulled him into this production? And before we jump over to some of the amazing set pieces he's created for you.
Well, how it started was he's a friend of mine, Gerald Nielsen, who does design work for us. And so she told me about Joe, and we were doing a photo shoot. And we wanted that steampunk look. And she said, oh, well, you have to go out to Joe's studio because he's really into steampunk. So we went out and we checked it out. And that's when it started to gel, this idea of having interactive steampunk pieces that Joe would create. And so he's created 3. He's created an organ carriage, and as you can see here, it's enormous, and it's got 4 wheels. It actually moves quite easily, surprisingly enough, and it has pipes, and of course pipes don't go up and down, but he has designed it, because it's total whimsy, he's designed it so that the pipes go up and down when someone is supposedly playing it. And it also has 2 lanterns on it. It's like a fine piece of furniture, the way he's designed it.
It's really cool.
And then, of course, the stops, the organ stops, they have names just because he can do that. So one is called Freudian stop, the other one's called Floydian stop, and then there's a bunch of Star Wars names to the stops.
And there's one called Whiskey.
So he's just had tremendous fun creating this, and there you can see the keys. It looks like you could play them, but of course you can't. So really fabulous work, and the organ carriage takes place in the music scenes with Bianca and Lucentio. So there's 2 big scenes where that will be playing.
She has to get her lessons. She has to get her organ lessons.
Yes. Although musically we won't be playing organ, but
right. Organ in it.
And then he designed a stove, which will do crazy things. And then the ornithopter is the piece that Mark and Danielle have been having a lot of fun with on the last couple of days. It arrived in the studio in pieces because that was the only way they could get it up to the 3rd floor, which is where our studios are in our new building. And then they assembled it. It's got these wings which flap up and down when you ride, when you pedal. This basically a tricycle. And it's called an ornithopter, apparently. And Mark and Danielle get to ride in it. And one of our other dancers, Alessandro, has been cycling it. So he's been learning how to move pretty fast with it. And we've had some really fun rehearsals with it. It's really sweet.
It's absolutely amazing. And I was fortunate enough to go out to the studio while these were in construction for a different scenario and getting to see these kind of in progress. I mean, the artistry that is in these pieces and the engineering and the innovation of co-opting all of these materials, from bicycle tires to wicker furniture to, all the materials that he accesses and uses for these, from veneer and the plastics and metals that are built into it. It's a work of genius, to see what he's able to create. And, I think an important kind of context for this that makes a lot of sense is he's somebody who has created installations for Burning Man before. And so, of course, he's got this bigger than life kind of vision that he's able to bring to it. It's really exciting what you all have given him permission to kind of pursue and bring back your way.
But it's also important when you're putting something on stage and somebody's looking at it from, like I said, from 75 feet back, it does have to be larger than life to read to an audience. And so both Paul's set and the interactive pieces that Joe has created, they are definitely larger than life.
Amazing. Well, I think we've got a video that I want to pull up that is a little bit about the set pieces, but I'd love to hand it back to the actors and hear a little bit. What has it been like for you to be working and having these as essentially a dance partner, these type of huge set moving pieces? What has that been like for you? And what have you kind of learned about yourself as a dancer through that process?
I think that is the perfect analogy, Eric. It is very much a dance partner. It's something you feel, you learn about as you continue to play. But just to speak to Joe's genius, you can tell when you see his creations how passionate and how inspired he is as a person. And there's no doubt in my mind that so much genuine love and care went into the creation of his set pieces, and you can feel it. So when we're in the studio putting hands on it and learning what we can do and how we can add movement and life, it becomes very real. And the more we strip away all of that functionality from our show and put ourselves into the story and the characters and their feelings, the liveliness of the set brings that out of us. And it's less work that we do in our minds and in imagination, and more that we are literally interacting with. And it's one of my favorite things. I feel I truly am privileged to be in that place on the stage, to be able to touch it, to really feel it while it rolls away, to feel the little bumps and curves, and it's really, really incredible. Very, very honored to be a part of this production.
Amazing. And Danielle, you get to write a lot, it sounds like, while there's chaotic happenings around you, but what is it like for you being kind of interacting with that?
I mean, it's really nice to get an opportunity to work with it, because we've kind of had this idea of what it would be like. And now that we have it and we can just kind of stay in character, stay in the moment, really feel what we're supposed to be feeling. I do get sick on it, and we have a lot of like lifts off and on to it. Actually, I think every time Mark lifts me up to it, and so that's a little bit of a challenge because it's higher than I had pictured, and so it just kind of gives it this larger than life feel.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one thing that's been really enjoyable is to make the decisions ahead of time in regards to Petruchio and Kate's relationship, how he gets her on and off of the ornithopter, and it becomes just as important as the dancing or the steps, or you have like a character arc through this ballet, and getting on and off the ornithopter is just as important as the pas de deux and the first scene and the first meeting and the third wedding. It all becomes a part of the story. And I think the more important those little details become, the richer the experience becomes for not only the dancers, but the audience as well.
Amazing. Go ahead, Penny.
the whole thing about the ornithopter is that Petruchio is an outlandish character, you know. And so he has to have outlandish wheels, and the ornithopter is definitely that. And so when it shows up after their marriage and they're supposed to travel off to his home, Catherine can hardly believe that the expectation is that she is going to travel in this thing. It's great fun because Danielle gets to look at it with disbelief, and then she has to ride in it, much to the amusement of everybody else on stage.
I love it. So I'm hearing that the ornithopter is Petruchio's Patronus of sorts.
Yeah.
Well, let's pull up this video and check out and see a little bit more specifically from Joe. Here we go. Such a good tease. Such a good tease. Well, I want to move us forward and talk about another really important part of this production, which we mentioned, we highlighted and gave a clue to at the very beginning of this whole happy hour. Tony, tell us a little bit about some of the intentional steps that you've taken to build in a strong female voice in this production. Because for those who don't know Taming of the Shrew, you know, the most famous line in it is, "I will tame you, Kate," right? Which is Petruchio essentially silencing and changing Kate. And that's often been perceived and been interpreted as this highly anti-feminist perspective. But you've taken a very different approach. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things that I did was I read an article by Elizabeth Winkler in The Atlantic, in which she explored the idea of Shakespeare not actually being William Shakespeare, but being a woman whose identity was hidden because Shakespeare had his own theater and was running that and presenting plays. And there have been a number of discussions and hypotheses that William Shakespeare is not the writer of the plays, but it's always been suggested that it's some earl or it's some lord that had to hide its identity. But why would they have to hide their identity? There's really no reason. But if it was a woman, there would be more than a good reason in the 16th century for that person to have to hide the fact that they're writing plays. So Emilia Pisano was put forth as a potential writer of the plays. And in many of Shakespeare's plays, the women seem to have a really strong voice. In fact, they seem to really understand their plight. And so it's interesting that Shakespeare, if it was William Shakespeare that wrote the plays, that he had such an open mind and such a sympathetic understanding of women's role in society. So I opened the ballet with Shakespeare supposedly writing the play, and we have text that's projected. But then when he stands up and turns around, it's not William Shakespeare at all. It's Emilia Pisano introducing the characters at the beginning of the ballet. And yes, there she is. Her father was a Venetian musician in the court of Elizabeth I, and she published a book of poetry, which is considered the earliest feminist poetry written by a woman. And actually, to get her work published at all in that period was pretty surprising. So she had traveled. She traveled to Italy. She had a much broader experience of life than William Shakespeare did. He never went abroad. So I like to think that perhaps she really did write these plays. It's a really cool idea. And then the other part of creating a ballet that's so important is the music. And this music will be played live by Orchestra Next, who's the brainchild of Brian McWhorter. And for those people that don't know, Orchestra Next is a training orchestra. So all of the first chairs are professional, but everybody that works under them is a student. So it's a fabulous opportunity for these young musicians to get some professional experience, especially playing in a pit, which is a very different experience than playing up on the stage. And I was looking for music, and I was on tour in Spokane, I think, and working through, I think it was through iTunes, just trying to find music. And I came across Louise Forenk. And I knew that I wanted, if possible, to use a female composer for this. And she, in the 1800s, she wrote prolifically, really. She wrote a lot of chamber music, and she wrote 3 really strong symphonies. They are every bit as vibrant and full and complex as Beethoven. And when I couldn't believe it. When I heard this music, I was like, this is fabulous. And so I contacted Brian to get his take, because if I was going to use this music and Orchestra Next was going to be playing it, I wanted to be sure that he was on board. And he emailed me back and he said, Louise Forenk, I've never heard of her. Who the heck is she? And then he started listening to the music and he said, this is fabulous. I can't believe I don't know this composer. So he was totally on board. So we're very excited to be presenting her work. I don't know that her work has been heard certainly in Oregon. It's been played a little bit in the US, but not nearly as much as in Europe.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. That's so exciting to hear about as you are pulling these pieces together, the intentionality at so many layers of the process. And to play with these ideas of there is so much disputed history about Shakespeare, and to let that be a source of inspiration to challenge this play that there are totally opposing perspectives on the feminist perspective of Taming of the Shrew, whether it's anti-feminist or highly pro-feminist, right? That there are both perspectives very deeply out there. And to really find that opportunity to say, well, let's really play with this. Let's play with this idea, these questions, these wonderings, and then pair it up with this wonderful woman that you get to introduce to us, because I had never heard of her either as a composer. And that's so exciting. Well, I want to hear from the dancers kind of in this perspective about this approach and theme for the production. So Mark and Danielle, for you as dancers, and maybe Danielle, I'd love to start with you, maybe being able to respond to this. With working on this production that is so female-centered, how has that felt for you? And what have you learned about yourself or your art form kind of in that process?
Well, I think what's so wonderful about Catherine is she really is the owner of her own destiny, and she makes all of the choices really about herself. She's vulnerable, and it's a side of her that she doesn't really let very many people see. Everybody sees her as the shrew who's hot-tempered and loud, and she behind closed doors is very she just wants to be loved. She really does. And when she meets Petruchio for the first time, she sees someone that is possibly her equal. And she goes through quite a bit of change throughout the ballet, which is always a really fun character to play when you get to adapt and develop. And by the end, her and Petruchio found their match, their counterpart in the other. And I think that the story is way more about finding love than it is about being tamed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love that conversation about finding your match and kind of the tropes that you're describing there that are from the original script of this idea of the shrew and like the perceptions of that. It's sometimes frustrating to think about how that still translates so deeply into today's societal perspectives and the ways that biases and perspectives are placed on women. And it sounds like you're kind of approaching that. And what I'm hearing is that it's not a negative thing about her. That's actually just a wonderful character trait that she carries with her with confidence. And that the love story is about her finding the person who understands that and maybe can match it in some exciting ways. So thank you. That's really lovely to hear. Mark, from you, what is your perspective or thoughts? What are you kind of discovering in that process?
Well, I think the three of us, Tony as well as Danielle, we've all discussed this idea of where is the truth in Shakespeare's story. Obviously, he has these lines that are controversial. There are actions taken between Petruchio or exchanges, I suppose, that could be deemed offensive, right? Especially at face value. And so you take all those things and you try to look through them and find where the truth in the story lies. And so what I feel we've kind of landed on is there can't be this taming on one side of the relationship without some sort of compromise or taming on the other. And so there's definitely this change. Kate has that harsh tongue and she's very witty and quick, and Petruchio is able to just absorb with his personality. He's able to absorb all that punishment that she just tongue lashed him. And then on the other side, he starts to become and take on this responsibility of being a husband as she begins to soften to his affections. So there's this exchange that doesn't go one way. And what we seem to have decided is that for it to be true love, a true connection, that there is that give and take. There is that I don't want to say compromise, because I don't think either party lets go of something, but there is this realization of balance. I also feel like that, to add to that point, it takes quite a bit of bravery to risk offending somebody in order to think through those ideas. So even though there's some moments in the ballet that are quite crude or suggestive, it's like we have to process those feelings in order to get to the other side. I think that's making sense. But
yeah. You cut out just a tiny bit there, but I think some of the things that I heard is that you have to present some of the problems in order to be able to work through them. Is that some of the pieces that I was kind of hearing there?
Yeah, and if we shied away from all of the harshness of the reality of an arranged marriage, or the reality of life's trials or personality deflects, or that you would never find that truth. And I think it's important to take the risk in order to find what's really precious and special about the story.
Yeah.
And certainly Shakespeare was not afraid of being crude himself.
That's very true. Well, we had another question that came in from Joe a while ago, but this feels like the appropriate time to kind of throw this your way. So how are we going to see Kate's attitude and wit come through in the ballet? And we heard some sneak peeks on that, but what highlights come to your mind, Danielle?
Oh gosh.
Well, I would love to jump in front of this question and say some great things about my wife. Danielle's technique is incredible. She's worked hard for it. She commands some very difficult steps and makes them look effortless. And so I think something that I've enjoyed watching is that challenge that Tony presents her to really push the technical envelope and have that be a part of Kate's personality, and to watch her do these incredibly difficult things and have Kate, they just roll off Kate's tongue. And I think we've created some really neat moments where it's almost a surprise or a shock that she is able to stand on her 2 feet, no pun intended.
Amazing.
Just own that technique.
Yeah. Danielle, Tony, anything that you'd want to add to that on kind of some of the ways that we'll get to see this?
Well, in the first part of the, when they spar with one another, there's a lot of choreographic wit that we have put into the ballet. Moments where she goes to slap him and it turns into something else. And later on in the bedroom part of the same thing. There's a few moments there, right, Mark?
It's like the ability to redirect her energy and create something new and another spin-off and a story and even though
so we have still tried. I mean, we've succeeded, I think, in still keeping it a comedy. It was written as a comedy. And so we do need to keep that in mind when we're creating this ballet. Yes, there's a serious subject underneath, but it's also witty and light and fun. And I think the audience is going to have just a visual feast for a start. But I think it's going to be visual and auditory. It's going to be a fabulous production.
Amazing. Well, we cannot wait. We're getting close to our time. This has been such a rich and wonderful conversation. Thank you all so much for your great wisdom and insight into your process to introduce us to some of the exciting pieces we get to look forward to, from relationship and choreography to the set pieces and costumes. It's clear you all have worked so hard on this production, and it's going to be a work of magic. So, Tony, please tell us, where can viewers buy tickets to attend, and what are the dates that they should be marking on their calendars?
The dates of the show are May 14th and 15th at the Holt Center on the Silver Stage, and you can purchase tickets through eugeneballet.org or at the Holt Center at 541-682-5000.
I love that you have the phone number memorized. So perfect. Well, thank you, everyone who's watching. I really hope that you will consider going and checking out this incredible production and this amazing work that this team has done together. Thank you, Eugene Ballet, for being a part of this and for being a part of our first live stream happy hour for the National Dance Week, which kicks off tomorrow. So all of you dance lovers out there, be on the lookout. There is tons of dance programming happening all throughout the course of the next week. You can check out the City of Eugene's website to be able to find more information about National Dance Week. And we will be back on Monday to talk to another Eugene dance company, Eugene Bhangra, to learn a little bit more about Bhangra dance and Bollywood with Sat Pavan. So we look forward to seeing you all on Monday. Eugene Ballet, happy process until your happy opening in mid-May.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you all. We'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye.